Sixth grade, Module 1, Lesson 24, Classwork, Exercise 1. Rob's fruit farm consists of 100 acres on which 3 different types of apples grow. On 25 acres, the farm grows Empire apples. McIntosh apples grow on 30% of the farm. The remaining of the farm grows Fuji apples. Shade in the grid below to represent the portion of the farm each type of apple occupies. Use a different color for each type of apple. Create a key to identify which color represents each type of apple. Okay, so let's start with Empire. So Empire, I'm going to make green. And it says 25 acres, the farm grows Empire apples. So notice that this grid is a 10 by 10 grid, meaning that there are 100 acres, or there are 100 different blocks in there, which is nice because there are 100 acres on this farm. So if there are 25 acres, I can just count out 25 blocks. So 2 rows would be 20, and then I need an extra 5. So all of these 25 are going to be Empire. Now I'm going to use red for McIntosh. So those grow on 30% of the farm. Now since it's out of 100, 30% out of 100%, let's write that this is red, we just need to find 30 parts. I'm just going to go to the other end and take out 30. So those are the McIntosh apples. And then the Fuji apples, I'll make blue. And it says that the remainder of the farm, the remainder is Fuji. So then the rest is Fuji, which would be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 whole rows, so that's 40 plus an extra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that's 45 acres of blue. Now we need to do the part to whole ratio. So part to whole for the green or Empire would be 25 acres to the whole is 100. For red, McIntosh, the part to whole is 30 to 100. And for Fuji, blue, the part to whole is 45 acres to the whole 100 acres. Exercise 2. The shaded portion of the grid below represents the portion of a granola bar remaining. What percent does each block of granola bar represent? So again, this is a 10 by 10 chart. So there are 100 blocks in here, and each one is 100th. So if we do 100th times 100, we're going to get a whole. So this all adds up to the whole granola bar. Now it wants to know what percent does each block of granola represent. So the whole would be 100%. And since there are 100 blocks, then each bar represents 1%. So there are 100 blocks that all are 1%, so they all add up to 100%. What percent of the granola bar remains? So the shaded portion is this that I'm going to outline in blue. And we want to know what percent remains. So it said the shaded portion represents the part remaining. So that would be, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows of 10. So that would be 80 blocks, and since each block is 1%, that would be 80% remaining. What other ways can we represent this percent? Well, we could write it as decimal, or we could write it as a fraction. So we have 80 out of 100 blocks, we could reduce it and say 8 out of 10. We could also say 4/5. This 8/10, we could write it as 8/10 as a decimal, or 80/100. You could find all kinds of equivalent fractions for that. Exercise 3. So we have an A, B, and a C. It says for each figure shown, represent the gray shaded region as a percent of the whole figure. Write your answer as a decimal, fraction, and percent. So picture A. Looks like we have 2 rows shaded. So these are all 10 by 10 grids, which means that there's 100 blocks in each one. So we have 20. It wants us to write it as a decimal, fraction, and a percent. So we have 20 out of 100. That's the ratio, which it didn't ask for. But we can write 20 out of 100 as a fraction. And that as a percent would be 20%. And then as a decimal, 20/100ths, we could write like this. So there are the 3 percentages, or 3%, fraction, and decimal. B, so B is kind of up to interpretation. So you could do, there's some dark gray shaded here, and then there's some light gray shaded here. So I'm just going to go with the whole thing that's shaded versus not shaded. So it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows that are shaded, which means that's 50 out of 100 is shaded, which would be equal to 50%. And as a decimal, that would be 50/100ths. So there are different ways that you could have done that. Maybe you only took this darker portion and did 25%. It's just up to you. Okay, picture C. So this one, we need to do a little more counting. So there's 10, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48. So there are 48 shaded out of 100. So our decimal is 48 out of 100, which would be equal to 48%. And as a decimal, be 48/100ths. What ratio is being modeled in each picture? So we already did that for A. So the ratio would be 20/100. In B, the ratio would be 50/100. And in C, the ratio is 48/100. How are the ratios and percentages related? There's a lot of different things you could say about this. I'm just going to say the ratios and percentages are equal. They represent equal values. Exercise 4. Each relationship below compares the shaded portion, the part, to the entire figure, the whole. Complete the table. Okay, so we know we have 6%. We want to write that as a decimal, a fraction. They've given us a ratio of 6/100. So there are different ways we could write it, but I already know that the ratio is 6/100, so I'm going to just make that into a fraction, 6 out of 100. And then I'm going to, I know that the decimal, 6, if I have the fraction, 6 to 100, 6/100ths, I can write that as 6/100ths. Now I need to draw the model. This will probably be the hardest part. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I need it the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so there's a 10 by 10. And I just need to shade in 6 of them because I have 6 out of 100. You could shade in any 6 you wanted to. Okay, next one is 60%. So 60%, let's do the ratio first. So we would have 60 out of 100, which means the fraction would be 60 out of 100, and the decimal would be 6/10 or 60 hundredths. Now we can either draw that 10 by 10 grid again, but I don't really want to. So I'm going to make this 6/10, and we can just draw 10. There's 10. They're not very evenly spaced, but that's okay. And I'm going to shade in 6 of them. And that's the same as if I had drawn 100 and shaded in 60. It's the same representation. Okay, 600%. So this one's a little tricky because it's greater than 100%. So 600%, let's start with the fractions. That would be 600 over 100, which would be, the ratio would be 600 to 100, or we could just reduce it to 6 to 1. So this is actually just equal to 6 holes. So what I'm going to do is just draw 6 holes and shade them all in. %. Okay, let's start with our ratio. So we'll have 32 to 100. Fraction would be 32 over 100. And our decimal would be, make sure I'm doing that. Okay. Okay, now this one, I'm going to have to draw the whole grid because there's a 10 by 10, because there's no way to do that out of 10 like I did before. Okay, and then I'm going to shade in 32 of them. So 3 whole rows. There's 10, 20, 32. So there's our representation. Okay, we have 55 hundredths. So 55 hundredths would be equal to 55%, or 55 out of 100, and then our ratio would be 55 to 100. Oh, I need to draw another 10 by 10. Okay, and then let's shade in 55 of them. So I'll do, there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, next one, we have 9/10. So I can write that as a decimal as 9/10, or 90 hundredths, which might help us. Our ratio would be 9 to 10, and this is equal to 90%. Now this one I can just do 9 out of 10. And the last one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10. So our ratio is 7 to 10. Fraction would be 7/10, which then we can write as 7/10 or 70%. Exercise 5. Mr. Brown shares with the class that 70% of the students got an A on the English vocabulary quiz. If Mr. Brown has 100 students, create a model to show how many of the students received an A on the quiz. So 70% got an A on the quiz. He has 100 students. So that means that 70 out of 100 got an A. So if we want to show how many students received an A on the quiz, we could reduce this to 7 out of 10. So you can either draw the whole 70 out of 100, or you could just draw 7 out of 10. Like that. What fraction of the students received an A on the quiz? So we already have that. We could say 70 out of 100, or we could say 7 out of 10. They're the same thing. How could we represent this amount using a decimal? Remember, just look at the fraction and say it. So 7/10, we could say. It's the same as writing it as a decimal. Or you could, if you wanted to write 70/100. How are the decimal, the fraction, and the percent are all related? So we can say that they all show 70 out of 100. So they're all representing the same exact thing. Exercise 6. Marty owns a lawn mowing service. His company, which consists of 3 employees, has 100 lawns to mow this week. Use the 10 by 10 grid to model how the work could have been distributed between the 3 employees. Okay, so he has 100 lawns that he needs to mow this week. And we can distribute it any way that we want. So let's say it just all needs to add up to 100 lawns. So let's think of 3 numbers that could add up to 100. Let's give the first one 30%, and the next person, let's give them 30% too. So that adds up to 60%. So I need how much more percent? 60 plus what would get us to 100? So let's give this person 40%. It says color over the name with the same color you used in the diagram. So we need to use 3 different colors, which, let's see. So let's do employee 1 was 30%. So there's employee 1. I'll change employee 2 to red. So they're the next 30%. And then employee 3, let's do in purple, would be 40%. Okay, so then we just need to write these as fractions and decimals. So fraction for 30% would be 30 out of 100, or 3/10. And then the decimal would be 30/100, or just 3/10. This would be the same. And then we would have 40 out of 100, or 4/10, and 40/100. So yours could look completely different than me. Those are just the numbers I chose. As long as your percentages all add up to 100, your answer is correct.